he was like her manager, you know, but they're like, you know, we certainly don't need him as a manager. But they were pretty polite to him for the most part. But they did tell Dorothy, get rid of this guy, you know, he's no good. You don't need this guy. Lose him. But for whatever reason, I don't know why. I don't know why. Why did everyone see him immediately for what he was, except her? Why Playboy wanted nothing to do with him at this point. They didn't even want to hear from him at all. They just did not like him one bit. It didn't matter what the girl would look like. They weren't taking any suggestions from him whatsoever. So anyway, now he is completely broke, like I mentioned, so he starts selling the prizes that she had gotten for becoming Playmate of the Year, one of which was a Jaguar, which he sold for $26,000. Dorothy finished filming in New York mid-July of 1980. Then she and Peter took a trip to England for vacation for 10 days. They returned to Los Angeles on July 30th, and Dorothy moved right in with him in his mansion in Bel Air. Now, Paul was very, very upset and jealous over all this. And so he was unable to buy a gun in the normal way because he wasn't a citizen. So he borrowed one from a friend, and on July 30th, he sat in his car outside of the Bel Air mansion of Peter and waited for them to appear. But after several hours, nobody came around, so he gave up. And then after a few days, the friend asked for the gun back. I don't know why you would lend a gun to anybody. That is a bad idea, but anyway, he got it back, luckily. And so, Paul looked in the classified ads, and he was able to find a gun that he could buy in that way. A used gun. It was a 12 gauge shotgun. So he had spoken to Dorothy and asked her to meet with him at his house on August 14th, 1980, to discuss, the arrangements, the financial arrangements and settlement and all that with the divorce, and was alive, you know, because Paul was dead, so blaming him wouldn't be very satisfying, you know. And in this book, he also claimed that Hugh Hefner had sexually assaulted Dorothy in the jacuzzi at the Playboy mansion. Now, Hugh Hefner was fuming over this. He denied the, charge, obviously. And he had a stroke, and he blamed the stroke on the stress of what was in this book. And he lashed out at Peter, putting it out there to everyone who was willing to listen that Peter was having an inappropriate relationship with Louise while she was underage, and that he was trying to turn Louise into Dorothy with that plastic surgery. Now, Peter did wind up marrying Louise when she was 20, and he was 49. The marriage lasted 14 years, and they are still involved in a professional and friendly relationship. She works with him in movie directing, last I heard, that is. And there are 2 movies out there like seems like 99% of the people out there did not like him at all, and she fell in love with him. But it's such a shame. I mean, I saw like real interviews with her, and she just did seem like a really sweet, naive girl. And what about the thing with Louise? That is a little bit weird, you know, but it's not our business really. Like, if he was doing something with her when she was underage, then that's definitely, absolutely not okay at all. We don't know that he did, you know, we have no proof of that. And if he married her when she was 20, they were both adults, they can do what they want. It is very strange to marry a 20-year-old when you are 49 and get her plastic surgery when she is a child so she could look more like her sister. Although he says that it was supposed to be just jaw surgery, but it